Hello friends, this is Priya Sharma. Welcome to Education Sarita. Today, we are going to start the first chapter of class 11th biology, namely the living world. Yes, in this lecture we'll understand what is living. In our surrounding, we saw many wonderful things which can be living or non-living. But how do we classify the things as living or non-living? Or what is living? To answer this question, we simply say that one who poses life are livings, like humans, plants, reptiles, birds, etc. If we try to define livings through some characteristics, then we used to say that growth, metabolism, movement, reproduction, cellular organization, etc. are the features that are used to define livings. The features of living organisms are also of two types. First, defining features, and second, characteristic features. Let's understand the two. Defining features. Defining features are the features which are present in only livings. They are without any exception and they are not shown by any of the non-living. For example, we can take metabolism. Metabolism is the sum total of all the reactions taking place inside the body, which is not shown by any of the non-living and it does not have any exception to. Because every living organism poses metabolism as it is composed of chemicals. Second, we can take as consciousness, as all living organisms are conscious about their environment and show response towards it. But no non-living can show consciousness or are aware of their environment. So it can also be taken as a defining feature. Third, we can take a cellular organization. As we have read that all the living organisms are made up of cell, so there can't be any exception and no non-living has a cellular organization. That is why it is a defining feature. Now we can take characteristic features. These are the features which are shown by living as well as non-livings. Exceptions are also present in these features. For example, growth. Growth can be taken as increase in mass or increase in number. Living organisms shows growth which can be up to a certain age. And if we take increase in mass as a growth characteristic, then non-livings also show growth. For example, mountains. As in winters, when snow deposits on the peak of the mountain, it increases its mass. And it is considered as the growth in non-livings. So growth is the feature which contain exception as well as it is shown by non-livings. Hence it is a characteristic feature. Second, reproduction can also be taken as a characteristic feature. But why? Does non-livings also reproduce? No. Non-livings does not reproduce, but the characteristic features are the features which have exceptions. So, there are livings who cannot reproduce, like mules. So, it has exceptions. Therefore, reproduction is a characteristic feature. Now, let's study about all these in detail. First, let's take growth. Increase in mass or increase in number are the twin characteristics of growth. A multicellular organism grows by cell division, as its basic unit is cell only. So, in plants, it occurs continuously throughout their life, but in animals, it is seen up to a certain age only. However, in case of injury, cell division occurs in certain tissues to replace lost cells. In plants, we see that growth is continuous. They used to grow continuously. But in animals like humans, we used to grow up to a certain age. After that, reproductive age starts and growth slows down. Now, if we talk about unicellular organisms, then unicellular organisms grow by cell division, which simply can be observed and the number of cells can be counted under the microscope. If we take increase in mass as criteria for growth, then non-living objects also grow, like sand mountains. As sand deposited on the sand mounds increases its mass, similar to the snow increasing the mass on the mountains in winters. So we can say that in living's growth is from outside, but the growth exhibited by non-livings is by accumulation of material on its surface, and the growth exhibited by non-livings is temporary, as the snow deposited at the peak of the mountain melts down in summers, leaving the mountain with its normal height. Whereas living's growth is permanent, it can't be reversed. Growth, therefore, cannot be taken as a defining feature of living organisms. Now, let's move to reproduction. Reproduction is the biological process by which an organism can produce a new generation of its own. Means reproduction is a method by which an offspring of a generation can be generated. It has two types, sexual and asexual reproduction. Sexual reproduction is the complex way of reproduction, whereas asexual reproduction is the simple way of reproduction. Sexual reproduction is biparental, whereas asexual reproduction is uniparental. This is enough for your class 11th standard. Other information we'll study in higher or 12th class. Now, asexual means of reproduction are used by less developed organisms mainly. Let's study about those also. First is spore formation. The filamentous algae usually reproduce through this process, for example, fungi. In this, spores are produced by the parent plant, and these are the microscopic reproductive parts. Second process is regeneration. Flatworms usually reproduce through it, like planaria. In this, every part of planaria has the ability to regenerate a new organism of its own by any of its part. Third is fragmentation. For example, Spirogyra, it produces through fragmentation. It splits its body into several fragments, producing a new Spirogyra. One more method of asexual reproduction is budding. Yeast and hydra usually reproduce by this process. In this process, a small outgrowth bud appears on their body, which then splits from the parent body, producing a new organism. Students, we all have studied about amoeba, who reproduce through cell division. It simply means that it leads to increase in number of cells. But can it be said as synonym of growth? Because growth also include increase in mass or increase in number, and here it is increase in number of cells. So can't be said as synonym of growth? Yes, it is the synonym of growth, because growth is equivalent to increase in number of cells or mass. So in unicellular organisms, growth and reproduction are equivalent, because if an organism is reproducing, it is equivalent that it is growing too. So growth and reproduction are the two characteristic features of living organisms. Now let's move to the defining features of living organisms. First, let's take metabolism. Okay, what is metabolism? Metabolism is sum total of all the chemical reactions occurring in our body. As we all living organisms are made up of chemicals, and these chemicals are constantly being made and changed into some other biochemicals. So these conversions are called metabolic reactions or chemical reactions. For example, the photosynthesis process taking place in plants, the formation of glucose in our cells, these are some examples of metabolism. Okay, can non-livings also exhibit metabolism? No, none of the non-living exhibit metabolism, and there are thousands of metabolic reactions occurring simultaneously inside all living organisms. They may be unicellular or multicellular, because whether they are multicellular or unicellular, they all are composed of chemicals. Hence, it is not exhibited by non-livings. It has no exception. All living organisms show metabolism. Now a question arises is, can metabolism occur outside our body also? Just think about it and comment me the answer in comment box. So the answer for this question is that yes, metabolic reactions can also occur outside our body in test tubes. We can provide a cell environment and then can observe metabolic reaction taking place in test tubes. In this, the reaction is neither living nor non-living. Hence, metabolism is a defining feature. It is of two types, anabolism and catabolism. First, anabolism, the reactions in which energy is consumed and small components combines to form complex substance. The type of reaction is called anabolism. For example, photosynthesis, and the reactions in which energy is released and complex substance breaks down into simpler form. The type of reaction is called catabolism. For example, breakdown of blood components or the breaking down process of complex substance consumed by us in our food, and in this process energy is also released. So it can also be taken as an example of catabolism. Now let's move to consciousness. The most obvious feature of all living organisms is the ability to sense their surroundings or environment. All organisms from the prokaryotes to eukaryotes can sense and respond to environmental stimulus. For example, if a tiger comes in front of us, we immediately show response towards it. Or if a foul smell is coming, then we used to leave the place immediately. These are what? The responses shown by us. We sense our environment through our sense organs and respond to the environmental stimulus. Stimulus are of three types. It can be physical, chemical, or biological. Whenever the response is shown towards the physical quantity, then it is physical stimulus like temperature. And whenever the response is shown towards the chemicals, it is chemical stimulus. It is done in pollination process. The pollen grains show response toward the chemicals only to reach the ovary. And whenever the response is shown toward the biological thing, for example, whenever we saw tiger, bees, and get scared of them and show response toward them, it is biological stimulus. Now, plants also respond to external factors like water called hydrotropism, light, phototropism, pollutants, etc. So all organisms around us are therefore aware of their surroundings. But only human being is the one who is aware of himself, that is, have self-consciousness. No non-living can show consciousness. Therefore, it is the defining property of living organisms. But if someone asks you that is there any other organism who have self-consciousness or who is self-conscious, then your answer would be that no other living organism is self-conscious other than human beings. Now here your topics are completed. We have learnt about all the defining and characteristic features of living organisms.